Hello YouTube, Jonathan here, and today I wanted to take another look at Axis and Allies Revised, this time specifically considering the United Kingdom, England, and what it might do on the first turn and just some general strategies it might pursue throughout the game. Now when it comes to turn 1, the British player should make a few assumptions. Now, it's likely that they will not have any Mediterranean fleet at all, unless the Germans do something unorthodox or just roll really, really poorly. They may have this transport up here, or they might not. But they should have this battleship and transport over here as far as their North Sea Navy. So anything you want to do into Germany should incorporate those. Now, what you're going to want to do, if this sub is still alive, and within striking distance of anything at the end of your turn, you want to take it out. You've got a couple fighters, you've got a bomber up here, you can use those. You can also use them, if you don't need them for anything else, to try and damage or destroy this German Navy over here. It has a transport and it has a destroyer that can shoot back at you, and then it has two subs that can't, which are likely to submerge, but you could get one round of attack power in and maybe destroy a few ships, hopefully not at the loss of any of your own. One of the things that I like to do as England over here on turn 1, in addition to clearing up that German sub if it's still around, is to move my fleet down here and immediately make a landing in North Africa. I'm going to be placing my new naval units up here, which, unless Germany has specifically positioned its air force over here in Western Europe, you're probably going to be okay. In fact, its fighters, even in Western Europe, can't get to your navy up here. Only a bomber can. So you want some sort of a defense there. But normally I go with maybe a carrier and a fighter and a transport or something like that. That includes a primary focus on a surface fleet, but then if there's any extra income, maybe spend that on a transport up here. I do like carriers in general, but especially in this game, something to keep in mind. For those who got into Axis and Allies later on in the series, carriers defend 3 in this game. So a carrier with 2 fighters makes for a very potent defense, especially when you've got a couple transports that, again, in this version, can soak up some hits for you. And they defend at a 1, the transports do, which helps as well. So normally if you're going for Navy defense, getting a carrier with some fighters is the first thing you should do. But I normally move my fleet down here, and you might be thinking, well, hey, if it's here, then Germany can hit it from Western Europe with fighters and from a bomber a little further away. But this is okay. This is okay because, and this move assumes that this is true, and it normally is the case, that the US, at a minimum, is going to move its destroyer and 2 transports over here, which means which means you should have a battleship, a destroyer, and 3 transports, which can soak up quite a few hits and cause quite a bit of damage. Maybe if the Germans go all out, they could take you out, but they are going to suffer horrendous casualties in doing so. So normally that's what I do the first turn on England. The US joins before Germany has a chance to counter. Now, if Germany has its navy positioned somewhere other than either here or here, which there's the most likely places, but if it's here or even over here, that's something you'll need to contend with in a counterattack, and you might not want to do that. But normally, Germany's fleet in the Mediterranean is not a threat to the British move down here to take on Algeria. Something else to consider, when it comes to England, you have a far-flung empire, so we're just going to do this piece by piece. You've also got these African units. Now, typically Germany will attack Anglo-Egypt up here, and they'll either take it or will be left maybe with a fighter afterwards, which they'll probably destroy on the next turn and is going to be better off flying somewhere else. You could fly it over here to help deal with Japan, maybe put it up here in China for a better defense. On the first, or maybe swing it up into Russia if the Russian turn didn't go quite as well, or Germany was a little bit extra aggressive and things played out in their favor. You might send the fighter up here to either stay or on the next turn swing around over to England or onto a carrier if you need to do that. But you don't want to leave that fighter just sitting there to die if it did survive the first German attack in Egypt. It's true you can move an infantry over here. You could even use your transport in India, which we'll get to in a second, to load up the Persian infantry, drop them off, or maybe an infantry from India and Persia and drop them off. If you want to do that, you could leave your fighter over here. That does open up the door for Japan, though. So that's just something that you want to think of carefully before you make any moves like that. And then, of course, you've got your lone infantry down here who should begin his long trek up north on turn one. You don't want to. He's only one infantry. He's easy to forget because he's out of the way, but you do not want to do that because typically the African battles consist of only a handful of units, and up here, Germany versus Soviet Union, one infantry may not make a huge difference, but down here, when you're talking about sets of 1 to 3, maybe 4 units at a time, that lone unit could come into play later, and you don't want them sitting around wasted. Now let's consider India. India has a couple infantry and an anti-aircraft gun. If you do not believe that the Japanese player will be very aggressive, you could build a factory on your first turn as England. Now that, of course, that changes some things we talked about up here, but you could build a factory down here if you don't think the Japanese are going to attack it, and then you'll be in a position kind of like in 1942, second edition, where you can start churning units out here and either fight Japan or swing up and help the Soviet Union. Now, Japan, if it decides it wants to go all out, can attack and take that factory on its first turn. It's kind of risky, it's going to suffer casualties, but typically that is something, if the Japanese player is willing to be aggressive, is something that they typically will succeed at. And then they can more easily replace those units that they lost in Asia because they have control over that factory. So that's not something that I would normally do in this game, though it is a nice benefit in 1942 to have that factory pre-built. Something that I do like to do, though, is take out this transport. Now, it does defend at a 1, it's not defenseless, but you could do one of two things, or actually more than two things. You could send your destroyer up here to take it out. It's a 3 versus a 1, you're probably going to win. That destroyer is probably going to get destroyed on Japan's turn. You could send your entire fleet up there, make Japan take a few more hits when it counterattacks you, but again, your fleet's probably going to be destroyed. Or you could send your fighter up here. Now that's 2 spaces to get to the fighter, or to get to the transport. You can land him there in China. Now, Japan is likely to attack there on its turn, but that'll force it to suffer another casualty or 2, and it puts Japan in a difficult position. If the Soviets have concentrated up here, they may not feel like they can move as much away from Manchuria, and they're down to just the 1 transport, because this one has been destroyed, with which to shuffle more guys onto the mainland. So if Russia has 4 or more infantry up here, Japan might think twice about devoting all those infantry in here when it can only resupply with 2 from its transport. Now, if you do want to play a little bit risky, you could move your entire fleet up here and either leave the plane on the carrier or land the plane over here. All in all, Japan is likely to only take maybe 1 more casualty. If you do that, then if you just move the destroyer. But they are forced then to choose between going out, wiping out the American fleet, which is a pretty standard move for Japan, or concentrating on yours. They could split it, and they'll probably win it both, but because they won't have as much firepower, they'll engage in an additional round of combat or two, maybe take some extra casualties. So you might consider that might be something that you want to do. I don't know that that's worth losing your entire fleet over here, but it's something to think about. Now, something I like to do with this fleet down here, there are two things you can do. Well, I mean, there are more than two, but there are two things that come to mind for me. You can take out this sub, which weakens the Japanese attack against Pearl Harbor, if they want to do that. You could try and keep the sub with your transport, which means an attacking enemy fleet might take maybe one more casualty. I don't think that's really worth it, because the Japanese have a battleship right here. They could easily move in to soak up one hit if they need to, and one round of combat is probably all this is going to last. So you could move both of these together up here, making it more likely that you'll kill that sub, because your transport can take a hit if needed, and your sub can keep going. Or you can split them, send your sub here, you could pick up a couple infantry, and just try and do something annoying and take out New Guinea. That's possible. It's only worth one production, and it's really kind of a 50-50 shot. 2 infantry attacking at a 1 versus 1 infantry defending at a 2. The Japanese have the forces to swing back around and take you out. It's more of an annoyance, but you might control that territory for a couple turns, and the Japanese may have to pull a few resources away from somewhere else in order to take it out. Plus, with their only one transport, and more than likely it's going to be needed to fortify probably Manchuria, but for sure somewhere along the coast, you might actually hold on to New Guinea for a couple turns. Similarly, you could use this transport, load up a couple infantry, and do the same type of maneuver against Borneo. Now, Borneo is worth 4 production. Again, 2 attacking infantry versus 1 defending infantry, so you might not take it. And it does leave India open. So if you're going to do that, I would definitely recommend moving this Persian infantry over to India to leave you 2 infantry there. All in all, it's a move that I try maybe half the time. I'm not entirely convinced that it's worth it, but especially if you're playing against a Japanese player who can get caught up in the emotion, sometimes that is a good opening move to frazzle them. And if you believe that Germany is the greater threat, just doing something that might slow Japan down a little bit, force them on their first turn or two to devote resources somewhere else, to just recapture some of these territories, it can be worth it. If you think that the Allies, England, and or the United States and the Soviet Union will have stabilized this front against Germany, maybe Germany is building defensively because they think all the Allies are going to go against them and they're counting on Japan to make a move, it might make sense to do that, to be more aggressive over here early on, because you expect this front to at least be stable, if not moving favorably in the Allies' direction. You can then swing back down here and solidify what's going on. I definitely would not attack Borneo in that fashion if you build a factory here. That would be that would not be a very good idea. I'll just put it that way. So when it comes to England, that is what I would recommend, just a general overview on the first turn and some general strategies that I would focus on. Is going to be primarily up here in Europe, unless you do decide to go with that factory down in India, just because you can't really produce along here. So that's how I see this game. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, things you'd like to see, things you'd like some commentary on, just let me know in the comment section, and I'd be happy to take a look at those and see what I can put together. I hope you enjoyed this video.